Yes. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I believe I have met and chatted with everybody in this room at some point in their lives, and probably multiple times, but if you don't know me, I'm Father Moore. I am the pastor of whatever church you can throw a stone at from where you're sitting right now. And I've been part of this high school project for 2 years or so. Very thankful to have you here tonight. This is a little bit of an info session. It is a little bit of a kickoff. It is a little bit of a networking event. So we're going to kind of cover all of those. We have 3 speakers. Our first is Sean Hoban. Sean, I was kind of asking him some questions to contextualize it. Sean was basically the age that Drew and Jana are right now when he started involving himself in Archbishop Murphy High School. And he also had a connection through his parents to education in the area. And so he's going to help us understand what it looks like to have a startup high school and what that looked like for Archbishop Murphy in the late 90s when he really got involved through now, or through at least their early building stages. After that, we have Benjamin Hall, who is a current student at Bishop Blanchette in Seattle, who's going to give us kind of a student's perspective on the importance of Catholic education. And then you have to deal with me, and I will be talking a lot about the details of where this high school project is at, some major milestones we've recently hit, and what we hope is the timeline given these milestones and the things that are left to do. So I'm going to leave it to Sean, and we really thank you for driving up, Sean, and looking forward to this.
Thank you. It is really just an honor to be here. It just brings back so many flashbacks to the early days of Archbishop Murphy and how many dozens and dozens of dinners we had in someone's homes like this, potlucks, trying to get the ball rolling and get some energy around that place. I have the good fortune of being on the steering committee for this group and have really enjoyed that. I think it's been inspiring for me to see the energy in this community to start high school up here, which I think is critical to any vibrant community, is to have a college preparatory, faith-based high school to train the future leaders of our communities. I want to introduce my wife, Kathy. Kathy's been on this journey from the beginning with me. We have 4 daughters who were all graduates of Archbishop Murphy High School, and I spent I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of hours in meetings and that around the school. But when I was away, Kathy was home with our 4 daughters and making sure they got their homework done and got fed and dressed and ready for the next day. And it was really a team effort to get our kids through there to have been on that journey with you and to have been able to celebrate the success of our kids and the impact that Catholic High School had on them. So the story of Archbishop Murphy High School is really a story about families. And I look around this room and I see probably a lot of families who are either in some stage of maybe raising kids and looking at this as a place for their kids, or maybe have been through Catholic high schools themselves and kind of looking back on that journey, and maybe this is an opportunity to create that in the community for you. Archbishop Murphy is very much the same. I was part of a group of generation my age who were all public school kids down in Everett. At the time, there wasn't a Catholic high school. You had to go to Blanchette, essentially, if you wanted to go to Catholic schools. But we were part of the St. Mary Magdalene parish there, and there was a group of about 10 or 12 families. We called them the family group. This was something that I think wasn't that uncommon with the church back then, but we would get together once a month, this family group with these 10 families or so. And one of the moms had a brother who was a priest, and he would come to whoever's house it was, and we'd sit down, we'd have mass, and the kids would kind of socialize, and the parents would get together. And it was really that group, probably a lot of dads and moms who had gone to Catholic high schools themselves when we were in like middle school, who said, wouldn't it be something if we could start a Catholic high school here in Everett for this community? That was probably in the early 80s that started, those conversations started, and it really took almost 10 years for us to really be able to open the doors. My folks, my dad was one of those early families that were in those conversations, and so my role there is somewhat of a continuation of those early days. I want to focus on a couple of key couples that were a part of that group. One of the legendary stories there, sort of the urbanness of Archbishop Murphy, is what they call the kitchen table group. And there were 4 couples, so that most of them came out of this family group that I was involved with, who were really the founding families in that group. Pat Jack and her husband, Steve Good and his wife, Mo and Carrie Helpin, and then Dick and Mary Henderson. And Dick and Mary Henderson really are the ones that we owe a deep gratitude for getting that place off the ground. Dick really was the one that carried the torch for that school for probably at least a decade. And so I'm going to tell us a few stories about that family in those early days and really what it took to start a school when it hadn't been 30, 40 years since a new school had been founded in the Archdiocese, and there was, I think, to some degree, some pressure against it back in those days. So it was really Dick who got this idea to start a Catholic high school. So he, like most of us who were probably ignorant about it at the time, got a meeting with the Archbishop, who was Archbishop Hunthausen at the time, and said, wanted to discuss starting this Catholic high school. So he goes down to the Archdiocese and meets with Archbishop Hunthausen in a conference room, probably not too similar to this. And Hunthausen was there at the time. Murphy was the auxiliary bishop, so he was the number 2 guy. He kind of sat in the corner there, and Dick sat across the table from Hunthausen, and he said, well, Archbishop, I'd like to start this Catholic high school. How does this work? Where's the checkbook? How are we gonna get this thing going, right? And Hunthausen kind of said, I'm sorry, but it's not something that we can do. We certainly can't financially support it, and quite frankly, I don't think he was behind it, committed to it emotionally and as an organization. And so Dick was kind of downtrodden. His head was down, his eyes were down, and he looked over in the corner, and Murphy was sitting over in the corner there, and Murphy just kind of looked at him, and he kind of winked at him, kind of like, hey, come see me afterwards. And so they set up a pancake breakfast the next day at Denny's in Northgate there, and Dick drove down, and they sat at the breakfast table there, scratching out the ideas for this Catholic high school, and Murphy said, I can't do anything, I'm not in charge, I can't write you a check, I can't do much to support you. But I want you to know that I'm behind you. I'm praying for you. Whatever I can do to help, I'll do that. It wasn't too long after that he became the Archbishop, and certainly that helped us in a lot of ways. But we didn't have facilities, we didn't have money, we didn't have staff, we didn't have anything. It was all just an idea. And somewhere along the way, we figured out that we could use an old grade school in Everett, downtown Everett, Perpetual Health Parish at the time, and we could start a school in that facility. And I think it just kind of goes to show sort of the creativity maybe and the sort of the will and the grit that it takes to start a school like this to find whatever facilities you can and make it work. It doesn't matter if they're new and shiny and bright. Jesus is there with us every day. He's going to make it happen, right? So we started in Perpetual Health Church. The first classes would have been about 1990 or so. The first class was about 20 kids. We started with a freshman class, and they kind of grew every year as they worked their way through. And probably had for the first 5, I don't know, maybe even 10 years, probably had around 100 kids, maybe 150 kids in the school. Dick and Mary Henderson were on the board the entire time, and they were active in making sure the school was progressing. And there's some incredible stories about those early days when they were really struggling. I was asked to get involved with the board. We knew the family, the Henderson family, obviously very well, and I have my brother and my dad shared an office with us when we were early in our business, and Mary Henderson called the office one day. I was probably 26, 27 years old, and she said, I happened to be the guy that picked up the phone. She said, Sean, Dick and I are ready to get off the board, and we think it's time for Hoban to get on the board. My dad was busy with something, and I was one with the oldest kids, so I figured that I guess it was my role to step in there. So I said, okay. So about 27, 28 years old, I go to the first board meeting, and I remember literally, we didn't pass a hat around. We passed, it was like a shoebox around. And everybody took whatever cash we had in our pocket, and we threw it in there to try to make payroll on Tuesday or whatever it was. So it was really, it was really that kind of commitment from families and supporters that got that place going. One of my favorite stories about that place really is about Mary Henderson, and she was as close to a nun as anybody I knew who wasn't a nun. But just this wonderful, wonderful woman. She passed away about 5 years ago. And after they had kids that were about my age. This is part of that family group, and we all kind of grew up together. But we were all off to college, and so Dick and Mary had a brother who was a priest. And they would sort of take in anybody that needed help in the community. Well, one of those folks who needed help were these two nuns. I can't remember what order they were, but one of them was Sister Aquanata, and they were in their 80s. They had spent their whole careers in education, teaching, and they were now volunteering up at St. Mary Magdalene Parish up there in Everett. And Mary Henderson would take Sister Aquanata up to the school every day, drop her off, and then Mary would go to work, and afterwards she'd come and pick her up and bring her back home to her house. So on their trips back and forth to work, they would talk about, what's going on in their lives, and oftentimes Mary's conversation was around, at the time it was called Holy Cross High School. And one day, as she dropped Sister Aquanata off, she said to her, Sister, I don't know what you've got going today, but I just ask you to say an extra prayer for our school today. We're kind of in a tough spot, enrollment's down, and we don't have, you can't charge much for tuition, it's really hard, and we got all these bills, and so anyways, just, keep us in your prayers. And so off she goes to work, comes back, picks her up the next day, or picks her up after work, brings her home. The next morning, she goes to drop her off at St. Mary Magdalene. Sister Aquanata gets out of the car, but she walks around to the driver's side of the car, and she reaches in her purse and she pulls out an envelope. I get a little choked up about this. She hands it to Mary, and she says, Mary, I want you to give this to the school. And Mary opens it up and she looks at it, and it's a check for $27,000. And she says, Sister, she says, I can't take this. She says, this is too much. This is no, Mary. She says, I have to tell you, I spent 35 years in education. And at the end of the school year, every year, kids would often get me a gift as a teacher, right? Sometimes it was a little apple, but sometimes it was $5 or $1, whatever it is. They would give her a little bit of cash. She's like, I've been collecting that my whole life. I've been keeping it in the little savings account, and I pray every day about what is the best thing that I can do with this money. And she says, and this is what I want to give it to, because I know how much this place means to you, I know how much of an impact it's having on your kids. So Sister Aquanata's life savings went into that place to keep it alive. But again, just sort of these stories of these heroes that came along at different times in the life of that school that really had an impact on it. I got a few more I want to make sure I don't miss here. Archbishop Murphy himself, played a huge role in that place, and I think it's when we moved from the campus of Perpetual Help to the location in South Everett was when we changed the name from Holy Cross High School to Archbishop Murphy High School. A lot of people don't really understand the story of how that all happened. Murphy was, again, sort of a quiet supporter of the place. And he would come up unannounced. He would come up regularly to the school when we were in the old rented facility and just show up on a Friday. He loved being around the kids. He wouldn't have an appointment. He would just sit in the hallway, sit in the stairs as the kids were going up and down between the floors, and he would talk to the kids, and he would get to know them. So there was something about that place that maybe everybody felt this way about. He was a pretty incredible man. Maybe everybody felt this way. But we certainly felt like he had a soft spot in his heart for that place. he was diagnosed with cancer. I don't know how many of you were around at the time, but he was diagnosed with cancer and had a long battle with cancer for years in his role while he was Archbishop. And again, another sort of emotional story that I like to tell is that there was a time when the students, we probably had 60, 70 students at the time, hosted a blood drive. And the legend is that the blood from the students' arms went into Archbishop Murphy's veins and gave him another 6 months of life.
Wow.
And that is sort of the connection between that school. His family knew how important that school was to his, and when he passed, they were significant contributors to us financially. And at the time, we felt it was appropriate to name the school after him because of the role that he had in that place. So we about 10 years into the school or so, I joined the board at age 28 or whatever it was in about 1992. And again, we had maybe 80 or 100 kids. We were growing, so every year we were probably adding 20 kids to the enrollment every year or so. And so we were starting to burst at the seams in this old rented facility. It was kind of falling apart, it was dilapidated, it wasn't worth putting any more money into it. So we needed a new location. And so we found this potato farm down in South Everett, and it was, I think it was $1.2 million or $1.2 million to buy it. But we didn't have any money, and so we ran a little capital campaign with a bunch of the families in the community there, and I know some of those families well, who in some cases, went out and took a second mortgage on their house so they could help us buy that old potato farm. And so we bought this piece of property in South Everett, but we didn't have the money to build the buildings and move in. So we just held on to it for probably another 5 years. We actually borrowed money against the land in order to pay for the annual operations of the school. So we were going the wrong way. We were going in the hole. And we got to a critical time there where we had essentially exhausted all of the leverage we could get from the land, the amount the bank would loan us. We were bursting at the seams, but we were still not cash flow positive. And so we went down to the Archbishop, this was Murphy at the time, and said, we're in trouble here. The financials aren't working on this thing, and we need to we need to figure out how to, can you help us, and we need to figure out where to go. I said, well, what I want you to do, the Archdiocese will underwrite you guys to do a feasibility study. Essentially go out and say, here's what we are, here's what we do to the community, and could we raise enough money from the community in order to pay off the debt, build this new building, and go forward. And thank God, by the grace of God, the report came back that there was enough support in the community for us to do that. Again, enrollment was good. Enrollment was strong all the time. We knew we had a good product. We knew the kids and the families were responding positively to it. But it was all this stuff behind the scenes where you'd wake up every morning like, how are we going to make it, till tomorrow? So we ran our first capital campaign. I think we raised about $5-6 million in that first capital campaign to pay off the debt and build what was really at the time our only building on campus, the main building. It was a gym with about 5 classrooms and a couple of locker rooms to it, maybe a little bit of administrative space. But in the time between then, when we decided we were going to go forward with that campaign, and the time when we actually enrollment kept going and going and going, to the point where what we built for the number of kids that we had. So then we went over to Everett Community College, and they had a bunch of old portables that they were surplusing, getting rid of, and they essentially said, if you'll take them from us, you can have them. But they were, 30-year-old buildings that needed all kinds of work and all that stuff. So that first year when we moved into that old potato farm, we had a beautiful main building and about half a dozen portables that, were in pretty rough shape. And I remember that summer before we opened the doors, the families, the parents of the students, and anybody else that we could rally, spent that entire summer out there tearing up the carpet and painting the walls in the portables and really just doing everything that needed to be done, bootstrapping that place in order to be able to open the doors for students in August, I guess it was. So we had success with that, but again, you know, we bursted at the seams, and it just felt like every year, as soon as we would finish one project, we would need more and more space and more and more. This would have been like, you know, early 2000s kind of window of time. So we've had 3 or 4 other campaigns and built other facilities out there. We went from the main building to Grace Hall, which was our first lunchroom. Prior to that, the gym was our lunchroom. And the kids would have gym class, and then they would take these tarps and they'd spread them out over the gym floor, and they'd set up the tables and they'd eat their lunches, and then they'd put it all away and they'd go back. Friday night they'd have the dance in there, they'd have their masses in there. Everything happened in that gym. It was no space for it. I would say that there was something magical about those years and those families that were in those early years, because it was their blood, sweat, and tears that went into that place. And you had such a deep ownership of it because you were a part of it. You had sacrificed for that place to be there. I hope we don't lose that over time, but I do think the parents today don't understand how much of a commitment it took from you know, the generations before them to really start that place. You all sit in I think a very envious role that you have an opportunity to be part of that. Those early days that really, you know, leaving something, a legacy for a community, you know, to take going forward. So we move into our new campus. We again, another sort of, you know, the hand of God coming upon that place. We had some wonderful faculty that joined us in those days. We had just a couple examples. Roger Brodniak is a guy who's still there. Roger was probably 5th year in his law practice in Everett, had gone off to law school, sort of had this calling, didn't want to practice law and be in the middle of people fighting all the time. He wanted to do something different. So he came out and he started teaching history at Murphy back in probably 2000, something like that. Still there today, teaching AP, GoPo, and all of the, you know, sort of challenge courses for students around history and government politics and those things. We had another teacher who I am indebted to forever, because she inspired my oldest daughter to get into medicine. But Dr. Wellenstein, she taught chemistry there for probably 20 years or so. She was a pediatrician in her career and left that again because she was sort of called to come. I say all those stories, these sort of, you know, these people that came upon that place, because if you don't start, it would never have happened, right? You have to, somebody's got to take that leap of faith. Somebody has to say, doggone it, we're gonna do this. And if you wait until the numbers all tell you that it's gonna work and you got all the money raised on, you'll never do it, because that's never gonna happen. At some point, you have to just take the leap of faith. And you don't know when these people are gonna come to you who are gonna change the lives of so many kids for generations to come. We had another guy who came along not long after we had opened the doors out at the new campus, a football coach, a guy named Terry Ennis, who I had known from, his dad was a old football coach in town, so I'd known him forever, and I was board chair at the time. And we didn't have a football program. We didn't have, in the early days, we didn't have hardly any athletics. One of the great sort of trivia stories of Archbishop Murphy is what was the first sport that we won the state championship in? Downhill skiing. It was, you only needed like one student to participate to win it if you ran some races, right? But Terry was a guy that I knew. Terry had been super successful in football. I'm a Notre Dame graduate, so football was kind of a big thing to me. But Terry had been successful and won a couple state championships, coaching public schools and all that stuff. But he was a Catholic guy who played football at Santa Clara. And he came to me one day and said, I want to start a football program out there. And at the time, we didn't, I think largely because we didn't have football. We had a lot, first of all, we had a lot of a lot more girls than we had boys. So if you wanted to play football, you probably went to the public schools. And the boys that we had probably weren't a lot of boys that wanted to play football. Maybe they didn't have all the physical skills to do it. But Terry said, I want to start a football program out there. So we met in May. And he said, I'm gonna start a team this summer. We're gonna play our first game in August. So we had like 3 months to get a football program together. Well, we didn't have uniforms, we didn't have equipment. We had a field, an old potato farm that was full of rocks, and we didn't have anything. Terry said, I'll figure it out. So we got uniforms. He couldn't play a varsity schedule because they had already been set for that season. So he was able to scrounge up a schedule where we played against the JV teams from all the public high schools. And the first 3 or 4 practices, the kids would just go out and they'd be picking up rocks, so we had a space that we could practice on. And he tells some great stories of those early days. I remember one of them that I always got a chuckle out of was this kid came up to him. This is like halfway through the season, and the kid says kind of pulls on his arm and says, Coach, I still don't understand. He says, how come after we score, we have to kick the ball to them? So he said, the first couple practices, I just want these guys to go home and watch football. Understand the rules of the game. So anyways, we had this first season, and we did okay playing this JV schedule. The next year, our first year in Class A high school football, we go out and win the state championship.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then we won it the next year, and then we won it 2 years after that. And you can say what you want to say about football. It gets you on the front page of the sports page, and it was probably one of the best marketing things that ever happened. It balanced sort of the genders in the classroom. I have 4 daughters. I was never going to have a kid that played football, but I knew that football was the band, and it was the dance afterwards, and it was the pep rally, it was all those things that make high school for a 14 to 17-year-old, all those experiences, right? So football was this great success, and then when we started having great athletes in football, it meant that some of them played basketball and baseball and all those other things too, and we started having a lot of success, outside of the classroom as well. And I think we're able to kind of offer that full. It wasn't probably until about 2005 that we probably were able to offer the full, kind of spectrum of experiences for high school kids. I think I had the good fortune of being in a leadership role there for a long time, but a place like that, it takes a village. It takes so many hands. It takes so many people. Quite frankly, it takes God's hand to make that, because there were so many times when we were on the edge. It wasn't going to work. Sister Aquina was a good example of that. When God's hand just came upon that place and gave us the opportunity to move forward. Now, if there's anything I can say to you here today that I hope you take home from this message, it's that you have to put your faith in God, wanting this place to be there for his community, for the kids and the families. It's as much. The kids have a wonderful experience, and it's like every high school. These are teenage kids. They do stupid things and cause all kinds of trouble. So that's that's sort of. But the families that it's the experience of being in there with these families who all have really had sacrificed so much. Not only just write a check to pay tuition, which is a huge part of it, but still volunteering. My wife was every lunch she was there with cookies and hauling kids around and doing all the things that you need to do to make sure a place like that. And I think that there's something about the community and the relationship and really the love and commitment that you have for other families that are on that journey with you that makes it super special. So I'm super excited about what you guys are doing. I'm inspired by it. I don't have the energy to lead it anymore, but I really compliment Father Moore. I've seen other pastors in other parishes in my days, and I've never seen someone who is as committed and quite frankly as skilled at getting this done as he is. It is something special. Father Mignano's been around this for a long time as well, and I know you're committed to it, and you know, have relationships all around the Archdiocese that we can lean on to help get this place going. So I've probably said enough. I'm happy to answer questions if you have anything specific or clarification on anything around that. I could be here all night, but I'll let someone else take the stage. But again, happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
While you are thinking of questions, I will give a story related to Archbishop Murphy. Our vocations director, Father Justin Ryan, went through Murphy, he's a Murphy grad, and one of his vocation stories, when he talks about how he found priesthood, involves winning a state championship with Murphy in soccer. And he said he was a soccer guy. He, like, on the summer, he would ref soccer. That was his high school job, and he was just on the soccer field all the time. So winning a state championship is the pinnacle of his existence as an 18-year-old. And he wins it, and he's like, oh great, I won a championship, this is what I'm going for. And then like 5 minutes later, he's like, what's more than this? And that's what led him to the Lord, and that's what led him ultimately, he went to Gonzaga, got a CPA degree, but ultimately back to that, what led him to priesthood. You know, that context of a successful high school in whatever way, right? We won't have a championship soccer team or football team right away, but that success in the context of religion and the context of him asking all of those questions at the same time led to a priest who is now our vocations director. So, anyway, questions for Sean?
Classmate of my daughters, they both co-valedictorians at their graduation together. Yeah, pretty special. I've gotten to know Justin really well over the years, and he's going to do great things for vocations in this community. He's just a great man. Okay.
All right, well, he's going to be around if you have more questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll have Benjamin come up, and it's always nice to hear from our Catholic school students. I sat at a school mass at Assumption. I think it was the last day of school. I was sitting next to a rising 6th grader, and I wish I could remember which one it was, but one of our new student ambassadors. And I am the head of the school in my clerical suit, right, a priest, and this 5th grader was able to confidently address me multiple times in conversation about what was going on. You're a 5th grader, like, what's going on? Catholic schools matter. So, Benjamin, we're really excited to hear from you because we know that your education has served you well.
Thank you. Well, good evening. My name is Benjamin Hall. Thank you for inviting me to be here this evening. This fall, I will be a senior at Bishop Blanchette High School, located in Seattle. This is my 14th year in Catholic education, and I plan to attend a Catholic university to study chemistry and theology. I plan to apply to 10 Catholic schools and the University of Washington, with the University of Notre Dame being my first choice. At Bishop Blanchette, I have been involved in a number of incredible programs. I'm a member of the National Honor Society, the Table Tennis Club, the Political Debate Team, the Chess Club. I have run cross country and serve as the captain of the Ultimate Frisbee team. In the classroom, I will have completed, God willing, a total of 10 AP courses when I graduate, with 1 dual credit chemistry course. After school, I work as a preschool aide in my former elementary school, Christ the King Catholic School in North Seattle. I do a lot of playing outside with the kids, cleaning up their messes, and indoor activities. Working with 2- and 3-year-olds has reminded me that Catholic school educators are destined for sainthood. And if there are any of them here tonight, God bless you. In my spare time, I really enjoy building things, playing video games with friends, fishing, and conjuring up chemistry experiments I've set up in my garage. My mom really loves that one. My mom asked me to share a bit with you tonight, so I've been reflecting on just how much my Catholic education, particularly my high school life, has shaped me, not just as a student, but as a person. I'm discovering that education is about more than just tests, papers, or college applications. It's about who we are becoming. And in a Catholic school, we're encouraged to become something more, to be people of faith, of service, and of leadership. One of the greatest lessons I've learned is what it really means to be a leader. Not someone who stands in the front for the sake of being noticed, but someone who leads with heart. Catholic education has given me the chance to grow as a leader through things like sports, clubs, and retreats. But more importantly, it's shown me that real leadership means putting others first and staying true to your values, even when it's hard. Service has also been a huge part of my journey. As a sophomore, I had the opportunity to work in an orphanage in the Dominican Republic with a group of classmates. It was an experience we will never forget. I've also volunteered and served much closer to home throughout my time at Bishop Blanchet. I've learned that serving others brings you closer to God and to those who you're meant to be with. It's not just about getting your hours done for the year. It's about choosing to love others and give back in thanksgiving for all we have been given. In my faith, my relationship with God has become something deeply personal. Through daily prayer, classes, and retreats, and the support of my teachers and classmates, I've learned to turn to God, not just when life is easy, but especially when it's not. As a school community, we've celebrated the announcement of an American Pope together. And we've shared countless sacraments and masses. Also, we've gathered in prayer and support for sick classmates and families in crisis and grief. Catholic education has helped me build a foundation that I know will stay with me long after I leave Blanchet next spring. As I look ahead to senior year, I'm excited and also incredibly grateful. It's grateful for a school that teaches us not just how to make a living, but how to live with purpose. Grateful for the values I carry with me every day. And grateful to be part of a community that believes in something greater than just itself. I'm so excited to learn from my mom that you will be opening a Catholic high school here soon. That's incredible news. Your children and grandchildren's lives will be changed forever. Thank you all for your hard work in making this opportunity possible for students here. I'm sure you all will not be disappointed. Thank you for listening to my personal story. I appreciate all the time and attention.
I think that's everything we could have hoped for. That was excellent. Excellent. We really appreciate it. I also remember which fifth grader it was that held my attention. It was Kirsty. She was all kinds of precocious on the last day of school. It was awesome. Just so I can shape my presentation appropriately, how many of you were at the session we did in the gym at Assumption a couple months ago? Okay. Okay, so online. Okay. Some of my slides are repeats from that, so feel free to, zone out and think about what you're doing tomorrow or whatever else. And then some of mine are new, so just be prepared. And Amy and Benjamin, thank you so much for driving all the way up. They live in North Seattle and they came up just for this. Amy is the development director for the Fulcrum Foundation. Fulcrum has been very generous with their funding, but also with Amy's time. She is such an integral part of our steering committee and helps us contextualize everything we're doing with the high school so that we understand how we fit into the Archdiocese and what best practices are. So thank you.
Nice to see you all. Congrats for making it this far. I'm so excited. Thank you.
Amy, thanks for coming.
So, I think Benjamin did a really good job experientially, and Sean hit some really excellent points about why we want a Catholic school. But just to review, why Catholic school matters. Many people, when we ask them why Catholic school matters, will say it's superior academics. And again, I think Benjamin's example shows us that is absolutely true. But I'd like to reframe this. I don't think that that is the primary reason why Catholic education is important. Superior academics is an outcome. It is not a core characteristic. The core characteristics drive the academics. And the core characteristic is that Catholic education educates the whole person. We have a criticism of the American education system that it's very much based in labor. It's trying to educate a workforce. And that's fine. That is something that we have to do. But there's a lot more to the human person than just what they do as a career. There is their soul. There is their mind. I know some of the people who read most widely are sometimes some of the most blue-collar people I know, because they're working hard with their bodies during the day, but at night they just want to read some Tolkien, right? And that matters, and a lot of that does come from educating the whole person. Anybody should have an elevated view of their humanity. Specifically, we educate intellectually. Of course, our schools are trying to give our students the best shot they can have at being a well-educated person. But they also educate them spiritually. What does it look like to pray? What does it look like to ask about God? What does it look like to engage in the Catholic faith or in religious practice? We educate them pastorally. This is something that matters to a lot of parents that I've talked to. What does it look like to care about other people? What does it look like to take care of people and deliver something greater than yourself? And then we educate them on the human metric. The human metric is something that's used in seminary to describe making sure future priests bathe and show up to their appointments. Truly, that is a cornerstone of seminary. But when it comes to a Catholic school, what we're talking about is virtue. What does it look like to raise somebody in virtue, to give them good habits that will lead them for the rest of their lives? I also tell people a core characteristic of Catholic education is that we believe that we are sinners in need of salvation. Now that sounds wrong when we're talking about like a K through 8, like most of you have experienced. Like, oh yeah, just tell the kids they're sinners all the time, that's going to help. What this means is that we believe that the human person invites constant improvement. If we are born perfect and are always perfect, and there's nobody who can tell us that we're not perfect, why do we have to improve? What's the point of education? The idea that Christianity is rooted in the fact that the human person always needs improvement means that Catholic schools have never stopped being hungry to improve our students. We've never said, yep, these kids are fine, or nope, we shouldn't discipline this child, or yep, we're just going to let them do this thing that's not good for them. Sinners in need of salvation, constant improvement. Catholic schools are constantly taking everybody that we have and helping them go to the next level in their lives. Also, and this is not always going to be true, but it's true of most Catholic schools in the United States right now, Catholic schools are responsive to market forces. Because we have to earn your tuition money, we also have to be responsive to our parents in a way that the public system tries to be responsive through democracy, through school boards. But if you voted in pick your favorite county and have not gotten your candidate in, you know how hard it is to make a democratic system in a large area responsive to your needs. Catholic schools are able to be a lot more responsive to parents directly and to have those parents be partners in what we're doing. Why a Catholic high school? In Whatcom County and in Skagit County, we haven't had a Catholic high school. Many parents have in their head, okay, this is fine. Everything's fine. I'll take them through 8th grade, and then public high school's gonna be fine. It was fine for me. It's fine for my other kids. It's gonna be fine. We have to overcome that with this project. Why a Catholic high school? Well, 2 causes and 2 effects. Cause number 1, we are teaching the whole student during the formative last years before adulthood. Yes, we can say we do our best to get them through 8th grade. And we like to say that we lay a pretty good foundation for those 8th graders that come out of Assumption and ICRS. However, I don't think any of us would say that high school was not formative for us. And what we find is the older these students get, the more they listen to their peers more than their parents. So, cause number 2, peer group of like-minded, like-valued individuals. If you have these formative years before adulthood where you're trying to get these kids to really think like adults, and they're listening more to their peers than to their parents, we want them to be amongst peers who share their values and families who share their values. And a lot of times, a Catholic school creates that peer group. You want to be able to trust the kids that your kid is going out when they're 16 with a license, they're going out to a party with, right? Or even when they're 14, that they're walking home from school with, or that they're in these field trips with. You want to know that what they're being exposed to, that those values are shared amongst everybody there. Effects. The majority of Catholics who went to a Catholic high school attend Mass at least once a month. And it is statistically significant compared to those who did not attend Catholic high school. Now, 53% is a terrible percentage. I wish it were much closer to 100%, but I will take the 13% improvement, right? Anything that we can do in the current environment to keep kids in the faith, I'm going to do. And then second, 99% of Catholic students graduate and 85.2% attend college or postgraduate education. Again, superior academics is not the purpose of the school. It is not a core characteristic of the school, but what the school does results in these numbers. When we focus on the whole person and educating the whole person, when we focus on constant improvement, the outcome is very good academic. And then finally, why a Catholic school here? Most of you know that, but we're the only region in Western Washington without a Catholic high school. It depends how you count Bremerton. They have a school that didn't go through the archdiocese process, and so they are Thomas Aquinas Classical Academy, which everybody and their brother would know is Catholic, but they're not allowed to call themselves Catholic because they didn't go through the archdiocese, and you have to have the archbishop's imprimatur to call yourself Catholic. So Bremerton may or may not have a Catholic school, but we're the only group on I-5 without a Catholic school. The last 2 started were down in Vancouver and Lacey. So the southern part of the diocese has schools, Everett right before that, and we're the last ones. We have 2 well-attended K-8 feeder schools. Assumption has wait lists in every grade except 1st grade and 7th grade. You know any first graders? We're really desperate for first graders right now. It's going to be a real small class next year. So please recruit some first graders. Has very healthy schools, so we know that there's a demand for Catholic education in this area. And the interest in this room proves this. We have parents who have expressed interest for many years in both Whatcom and Skagit County. Finally, we took a survey in 2024, just seeing who would be interested, and we had responses from 342 families with school-aged children who said they really wanted a Catholic high school. Okay, where are we going? Well, first we have to know what we're trying to do. We are trying to create a school that does this. This is the mission statement that we workshopped and worked on in the steering committee for a while, and this is what we're pretty proud of. Every word in this matters. So first you have to ask what culture is. Now the culture is obviously Christ-centered, it's a Catholic school, but that learner's word is a really important word because we want to make sure everybody at that school wants to learn. We don't want somebody there who's not curious or who's not engaged, who's not looking to learn about academics, but also the Lord and themselves and society and how to take care of the people around them. We want people who are learners. And a lot of these schools, Seton in Vancouver is one of our kind of sister schools, they have a culture stream. They ask families when they come in, what do you want out of the school? You know, what do you value in these sorts of things? To make sure that you have that group of like-minded peers. And we have to ask, what's our culture screen? Well, I think a lot of it is making sure that we have learners. We want to inspire them. That's a word rooted in the Holy Spirit. We want to fill them with the Holy Spirit so that they can encounter Christ, engage important ideas, and apply their gifts. And those 3 verbs are sort of the driving 3 verbs. Encounter Christ, we can't force belief, but we want to make sure that every student who goes through the school has an experience of the risen Lord. And whether they accept him or reject him is up to them and their relationship with God, but we want to make sure that that encounter happens. We want them to engage with important ideas, not just memorize, but engage and critically engage. How does this idea, which is an important idea, something humanity's been struggling with for centuries, how does this fit into your life? How does this fit into your community? And then, of course, the application. If they're doing it just for themselves, it means nothing. But if they're doing it for themselves and the rest of the world, it means everything. And then we're still workshopping this. This hasn't really been voted on in the steering committee, so this is my version of the vision statement, and there are a couple other ones floating around, but our vision, which is what we want to achieve concretely, is to establish an Archdiocesan Catholic high school to serve the Northern Deanery. Northern Deanery is Whatcom, Skagit, Island, and San Juan counties. Very hard to serve the islands, so we're really focusing on Whatcom and Skagit. And then specifically, we want the high school to have an enrollment of greater than 200 students. Anything less than that might be sustainable, but it's not necessarily what most families are looking for, so that's what we're aiming for at some point. We want to excellently prepare our students for all vocational tracks, but to make sure that there's at least a college prep component in there. But we're also aware that there are many, many good jobs today that we are lacking people for, that pay well, that can serve a family, that are vocational non-college tracks, and we make sure our students are prepared for that. And we want to reflect the diversity of our Catholic churches. I think about this with Assumption all the time. I have a Spanish Mass that is the most well-attended Mass in the entire county. So if I have that many Catholics at Mass on a Sunday, I better have a good number of Hispanic kids in my school. And so trying to reflect that and make sure that we're serving the church, not just those who are easily able to access Catholic education, but everybody. This is a church mission, and so we want to serve all of those that the church serves otherwise. Now, where are we at? What has been accomplished? There's a lot on here. I'm going to summarize. We have been meeting for a long time, and we've been meeting with the Archdiocese because the thing we want is an Archdiocesan Catholic high school. We know that the Archdiocese is the point of stability for these schools. If we started it ourselves, did it independent, sort of what Bremerton did, it's hard to know if we're going to stick around. We don't have the same support as we do if we're with the Office of Catholic Schools. And just speaking from an ecclesiological perspective, the Archbishop is the guarantor of the Archdiocese and ultimately of the Catholic faith. If I want this school to be Catholic 50 years from now and not go in a weird direction because the board decided they wanted to follow a fad, I have to stick with the Archbishop because he's the one who is charged with keeping us in union with the Pope and Rome and keeping us in union with the rest of the Catholic Church. So we've been meeting with the Archbishop. Where are we at right now? We've just hit some really significant milestones. So we're working on curriculum, we're working on location, we'll talk about those by the end, but the significant milestones are, where do we have to go to open by fall 2026? So many of you are here because you have 7th grade students, rising 8th graders. The goal is to open the doors so that those rising 8th graders can go to the school as freshmen. That's what we want. How do we get there? Well, 2 major things have happened. We have been given a pledge, Cornerstone pledge. I'm going to put a slide about that. I'll get to the finances in a bit, but functionally we have to raise $3 million to cover this thing over the first 7 years and to make sure that we're financially stable. And this is what those gifts look like. So we need a Cornerstone pledge, and then we need this many pledges to make $3 million. It can be divided up differently, but that's kind of what we're thinking, right? So we're very blessed to be here at Financial Plan today because Jamie Twining has agreed to help start this school. He's the one who's getting us off the ground and making sure that we have that money to cover the first year where you don't have any students, where you're just trying to build the thing. So we're very blessed to be in Financial Plan, to be with Jamie. I'll tell you a couple things that I'm excited about with Jamie. He doesn't want the recognition, but he gave me permission to do whatever I have to do to get this thing off the ground. So every now and again I have to drop his name. Here's why I'm excited. I'm excited because in addition to being very generous to help us get off the ground, Jamie and Jeannie are deeply connected in the community, right? They are very active Sacred Heart parishioners, and they have a lot of grandkids going through Assumption Catholic School. That level of connection is really important because they understand that this isn't just an abstract notion. It's not just, I believe in Catholic education generally, but it's, I've seen the effect of Catholic education in the lives of my children and grandchildren. And different kids are going to make different decisions. Not all the Twinings are necessarily going to end up at the school, but, and it can serve their family directly. And so they have that real deep connection, which I think is going to serve us very well in our early stages of starting this thing. We're hoping to find similar donors and similar connections in Whatcom and Skagit County. People who are just deeply invested in our churches, deeply invested in our children, who are willing to step up and help us with that. So that's milestone number 1. Now that's necessary because here are the finances. The way we've divided, yeah, I know, it's a lot of numbers, don't worry about it. I'll summarize, it's okay. The way you do this thing, year 0 is no students. You need to do a lot of work in getting buildings ready, in applying for a 501c3, and meeting with families, and getting registration pledges, and meeting with donors to get financial pledges. There's just a lot of work that happens in year 0. And that is all revenue negative. We have no revenue in year 0, generally, right? Except that this number right there. So that's $2 million. And then over here, there's an endowment fund for $1 million. The endowment we think is helpful and necessary, not just because it gives us some funding each year, but it also shows that this thing is here to stay, right? If you have a fund that's not intended to be spent, that shows that you really thought this thing out. And you don't want a startup that's going to fail. So let's say we hit our projections in year 1 and year 2, but we miss them in year 3, and we fall behind. This is a buffer that allows us to say, this thing's not going to go under while your student's there. Right? We're going to be able to get every student who goes in out with the degree. We have enough of a buffer to do that. Now, if it were catastrophic and it's just not sustainable like we think it is, then that school might close. But every student that we take in, we're going to get out with a degree. That $2 million covers operational expenses in revenue neutral years, and then that's this bottom line here. So you can see you're losing a lot of money in year 1 because you only have freshmen, and you really need 4 years of tuition to make this thing work. And then you're losing less money and losing less money to the point that you begin to get close to revenue positive here. You go down a little bit, this is because there's a split class there, you have to add some faculty members that year, and then you're up and then you're down because you're adding faculty members, and then you're beginning to be stable. But over the course of that, with this projection at this tuition level, we can play with that. You know, eventually you come out with a savings account, which is what we're looking for. So year 0, no funding. Year 1, freshman class. Year 2, freshmen, sophomores, juniors. Year 4 is the first year you have 4 students. You're collecting 4 years of tuition. And then ideally your enrollment's going up, you're stable, you have a donor base, that sort of thing. So the gifts that we were looking for, that helps us get through the first 7 years. $3 million gets us through the first 7 years. And we are looking for donors in Whatcom and Skagit County to help us do that, to figure out what that's going to look like. We have gift number 1, but we need the rest of them. You want to meet with me about that? I will absolutely meet with you about that. Just so you know. The second milestone that we hit is once we had a cornerstone pledge, that allows us to make an offer to a principal. Well, sort of. Here's the caveat. The caveat is we are not approved by the Archbishop, officially, fully. We have been talking with the Office of Catholic Schools, we've been talking with the Archbishop, they are well apprised of what we're doing. But we have to give them an official proposal on things like curriculum, location, budget, staffing, all that. And until they have the official proposal, they can't really sign off on it. So we've been going back and forth about, look, official proposal, there's a lot of work that needs done. We've done most of that work with volunteers and a steering committee, but we need to hire somebody to get us over the line. And we can't hire and approve, but we can't be approved until we hire, and what do we do about that? And so we got permission to hire an employee. I am not allowed to say that that employee is going to be our first principal. We have to get approval from the Archbishop before we can say we're even opening a school, and we have to do an open hiring process for the first principal. But I can say that we are trying very hard with this hire to hire somebody that we think would have a very high chance of making it through the open application process and then would continue on as our first principal. And very recently, we were able to make the offer to Andy Ramin. Now, many of you know that Assumption just had to look for a principal, and I tried so hard to steal Andy for Assumption, and he was not going to do it. And then I was like, fine, if I can't have you for the elementary school, I want you for the high school. We kept talking, and I think it was the Holy Spirit. Andy can give you his own story. But at some point, Andy comes to us and he says, all right, I'm convinced. I'm ready to jump in. And I'm ready to jump in with both feet. That means a lot, because what we've heard from Seton High School in Vancouver, again, one of the most recent Catholic schools to start, a model that's really attractive to us, very good with Catholic identity, is hiring somebody who is well respected in the community was really important. And Andy has credentials, on the slide, in Burlington and in Whatcom County. He's very well known amongst our parents at Assumption School. He's very well known amongst the public school community in this area as a local principal. And the fact that he wants to jump in, and we're trying to make it not a financial risk, but still wants to take a risk with us on this, means that he's all in. And having somebody who's all in with the credentials to get us where we need to go is really, really exciting. Now those two things have come together in the last month. So everything now is very exciting. But the first steps after this, again, this is what we've accomplished. This is what we still have to do. First steps after this, Andy's going to need to meet with families, specifically 7th grade families in Whatcom and Skagit County. We don't know what our enrollment looks like, and our financial model really depends on knowing what our enrollment looks like. We need to know who's really ready to do this thing or not. There is a significant argument to be made, and I think Sean made it very well, that being part of a startup, from one perspective, can feel very risky, but from the other perspective, is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We get to build this thing from the beginning. We get to decide what this thing looks like. And particularly our first 2 years of families, our 7th and 6th grade, or I guess rising 8th and rising 7th grade families, they get to help us determine, and their students get to help us determine, what are the sports we offer in the first year? Are we going to win a state championship in downhill skiing, right? Is that what we're going? We've got Mount Baker right here, so we could, right? Is that what we're going for? What are the extracurriculars? How do we teach the class? What is our school culture? How do we treat each other? Do we have an honor code? What does it look like to set classroom rules? What are the traditions that we have from the beginning? It's super exciting to be part of those first couple classes. I was the 5th graduating class of my college, so I got to hear all the stories about them doing that, and it was still very exciting. I got to give my college commencement address, and the message I gave to my community was, we are beginning to know what we knew, but we should never grow old. And I think that's very true. But the first couple classes, they're just super new, and it's super exciting. And what we're looking for isn't just students to pad our enrollment numbers. We're looking for partners. We're looking for parents and students who are willing to go on an adventure with us, who are willing to build something with us, who want to leave a school in the Northern Deanery that reflects the values that they brought into it and that desiring out of this new adventure. So, the first steps for Andy, meet with parents, try to get some real concrete numbers about who's actually willing to come to this school, and to meet with others to make sure that we can hit the goals that I showed, to make sure that we can do that. Now, this can come in, development committee wanted me to take out the 5-year column, so sorry, ignore that, I guess, but generally, we can pay our bills if the money comes in over the course of 3 years. So, yeah, we might be asking somebody for $150,000. That's a lot of money. $50,000 a year is a lot of money, but it's less than $150,000. It's just $50,000 over 3 years. It's fine, right? But it's got to be with donors, and we can pay our bills because, and in year 0, we've got some red lines that we have to hit. We have to make sure we have enough students enrolled and we have enough money coming in year 1. In addition, he's going to continue to work with the Archdiocese on the curriculum, on the location, to make sure that we have everything. We're trying to get all this to the Archdiocese by September so that we can get the Archbishop's approval by the end of December, and that we know for sure whether we're opening, ideally in January or February. We can get that final determination. And after that, it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of work hiring teachers, preparing buildings, making sure we have textbooks and desks and everything else. Final note, because this is these are the questions we get from everybody. So regarding tuition, it's gotten a little bit complicated. Met with the superintendent last week about our financial projections, and he pointed out we needed to do a better job of accounting for class sizes. We needed to have a number at which we split faculty, so at a number at which you're bringing in this number of freshmen, now you have 2 sections of English rather than 1 section of English. So if you've talked to us offline, we've been really pushing, we want to try to keep tuition to $15,000 a student a year. Which if you go to a Catholic school right now, you're like, oh my gosh, that feels like double of what I'm paying. It's not quite double, but it feels like it, right? That's a crazy number. It's lower than every other archdiocesan Catholic high school, so doing great. But when we went back to that projection, things are much safer at 16.5. So we don't know. We got to work that out still with the archdiocese and get some final numbers. This number here is the amount of money we expect to pay out in tuition aid. So this is what we bring in at 16.5 each year, and this is what we pay immediately back out at 16.5 to help families who can't quite make that number. So we're building in 25% of our tuition money just going right back out to help families who can't make it. That's a big number. I think a lot of schools are doing 15 or 20%. I forget exactly what Assumption Catholic School does. It's built into every Catholic school tuition model, but it's there. There is help available. We just have to be strategic with that help. We just have to make sure that we're using that money to try to, for example, bring in some of my really, really faithful Hispanic parishioners who, you know, at Assumption can't pay more than $4,000 a year. And so what does that look like to bring them to the Catholic high school? Point I was making was tuition level, right? So 15,000 or 16.5, we're still going back and forth. And then location is the next question we always get. So here are 2 maps, and then I'll shut up and you can ask questions. We are looking at 2 locations. Our life is so much easier if we use a church-owned property to pay rent for the first 7 years. That financial protection means no rent. You have rent, tuition just goes up higher. So we're looking at Sacred Heart. The parish office there has very large classrooms, 6 very large classrooms. If you get rid of the accordion door and put it in an actual wall. 6 very large classroom-sized rooms. And the office is generally not used during the week. So, you know, it's easy enough to share between faith formation if it's used in the evenings or on the weekends, and a high school. My commitment to the high school, if we use Sacred Heart, is I still want the high school to quote-unquote own the building, which is to say they get to determine what goes on the walls, they get to determine the flavor of the thing, because we're doing so much culture work at the beginning, it needs to be the high school's building that is used by the parish. So Sacred Heart is one option. To make that work, to get 200 students, you need 2 portables, because you need 8 classrooms going simultaneously. So you'd need to put 2 portables on the south lawn. That lawn is hilly, but it could be flattened. You could put portables out there, probably a science lab, since we don't have the facilities in the building. Possibly 3 portables if you want to expand the bathrooms, because the bathrooms are going to get rough if you share those between 200 students. They're already a little rough. So that's what we're looking at Sacred Heart. But the other option is St. Charles in Burlington. St. Charles in Burlington has a very large field behind it. And the building itself couldn't host the high school except for, like, you do mass in the church, and maybe you could use their hall as a lunchroom, and possibly as a PE room. But generally, St. Charles is, you have all of the portables you'd ever want, because you have all the space you ever want, and you would try to build out from there fresh. Locations are both temporary locations. Just like Murphy started in a rented building, everybody starts at a place that is not their permanent location. Is just get something off the ground in a way that works well, that can show that we can educate these students that this high school is successful, and then as we build enrollment and a donor base and support, then we look at a permanent campus. Part of that is going to determine where enrollment comes from. Seton started in Battleground. If you know South Washington, Battleground is like way north of Vancouver, because they were competing with Portland Catholic schools just across the river. So they figured the more north we get, the more students we'll get, we're not competing with Portland. All other kids still came from Vancouver. They just did. Nobody was coming from the north part. And so when they built the school, they moved it south, because they just put it where all the kids were. We're just starting a temporary location. As this thing settles, we'll figure out what the permanent location is. Maybe it's an Alger. If you know somebody who owns a tree farm, just let us know. So here are the maps. This is drive time. So people are always asking about drive time. What does it look like to get there? So if we are at the Sacred Heart location, a 30-minute drive radius, which is very reasonable to get to a Catholic high school. In Seattle, when I went to Kennedy, we had lots of people driving for 30 minutes. We had a good number of my friends drove for 45 minutes to get there. But that's a 30-minute drive radius. It reaches us all the way to the Canadian border, and at least down to the main population center in Mount Vernon. It doesn't hit kind of the farmland south of Mount Vernon, but we get most of the population center. What we miss at 30 minutes is Anacortes and Oak Harbor. Those two are just basically unreachable within 30 minutes. Anacortes is 45, the Sacred Heart location. Okay, that's what it is. This is the 40-minute drive radius. Now the next one, it's a bigger map, it's sideways. I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out how to format the slide. This is Burlington. So Burlington, 30-minute drive radius, you hit the population center of Bellingham, but you miss basically all of North County, even North Bellingham, you miss in 30 minutes. But you do hit Anacortes, and the interesting thing here is you start pulling from North Snohomish County. So population centers. Whatcom County has about twice as many people as Skagit County. It's about 220,000. It's about 110,000. North Snohomish County is crazy in population. They are blowing up in population. So it depends how you do the math, right? You could probably draw more kids if you go here, but you go too far south and you start competing with Murphy. Somebody who lives in Arlington is about equidistant between Burlington and Murphy, and then further south you get there. Burlington, 40-minute drive radius. You're hitting Ferndale. You're not yet hitting Blaine or Linden. You're also hitting all the way down to Everett. So once you hit this area, there's this question of, okay, are we gonna actually get kids from this area? We get some kids from Stanwood and Arlington who go up to Mount Vernon for Catholic school, for Catholic elementary school at ICRS, but we don't know. So we're looking at that. We're looking at enrollment. Once Andy meets with a bunch of families and we know, how many kids are coming from what place, and once we continue to work on the property stuff, how expensive it is to retrofit Sacred Heart, or how expensive it is to bring in portables, we'll have a much better idea on location. Okay. That is all the information dump I wanted to give you. The rest of the night is Q&A for myself or for Sean. Or if you are on the steering committee, raise your hand. You can ask. Molly is too. Drew is basically as well. He's on the finance committee. Jamie's going to jump on. He was in the Bahamas on our last steering committee, and they lost internet, so he couldn't do anything for a week. So we're glad to have him in Bellingham. So ask any of us any questions. We will try to answer them as best as we can.
I just want to say how fortunate you are to have Father Moore leading this for you guys. In the early days of Murphy, we didn't have that kind of support from the deaner. They weren't against us, but they weren't champions for the effort. He is an inspiration to me, and I think is really the reason that you are where you are today, and will be successful.
All right. Well, yes.
So I'm a homeschool mom, and I have been for over 20 years. And I've already have launched 4 kids. I have 2 left. And those 4 kids said, I wish we could have gone to high school, Mom. But yeah, they would miss out on that experience. They ended up doing running start, so it wasn't the same. So my hesitation only is just some of the horror stories I hear coming out from Catholic high schools in Seattle, Maine. You went to Catholic high school, you said you went to Kennedy, so, and I don't know when you graduated, so you don't have to tell me, because it will never know.
Yeah, that's right. I'll tell you, but you won't like it.
Yeah. So I just would be asking how, I'm sure you'd have to write like a deeper mission or more like, with the goal that's completely, for like people like myself who are just worried what's gonna come in, that won't be Catholic oriented, like ideologies that might start infiltrating.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has been my huge concern from the beginning. Kennedy was incredibly influential for me. I would credit all my success in life to what I got at Kennedy. Even then, I was skeptical of Kennedy's religion program. We had a switch in principals between my sophomore and junior year, and the new principal came in and he said, students, just write me a letter. What do you want out of the Catholic school? Like, what's going on? What do we need to improve? Whatever else. And I wrote him a letter about Catholic identity. And I said, I think our Catholic textbooks aren't teaching anything worthwhile. These are terrible textbooks, and we need to do better. And that was before anybody was talking about like gender issues. Kind of a big problem in schools today. A close friend of mine, Father Patrick Sherrard, now the chaplain at Kennedy, for various and sundry reasons, but we're very lucky to have him there. And he'll tell me the success stories and the the lack of success stories in just trying to bring a Catholic presence to a large Catholic school. I think your fears are very valid. Here's how we're dealing with it. The Archdiocese, for a lot of complicated reasons, some I agree with, some of which I'm waiting to see how they play out, is moving all of our archdiocesan schools to a board governance model. So previously, from when Kennedy started until about now, the superintendent was the direct supervisor of the principals. The superintendent hired the principal, and the principal ran the school. That may or may not have gone well, depending on the era and the decade, but certainly that was the model that Kennedy was under when it had a big blow up about some gender issues right before COVID happened. It was in the news, if you read the news. That model didn't serve as well. The board governance model has its own ups and downs. On the one hand, you have a better group of expertise advising the principal. You have business leaders, you have community leaders, you have a lot of people who can help shape the school and shape it sort of more long-term. On the other hand, you have to be really careful that the board doesn't get a strange notion and have mission creep to take the school away from what it's supposed to do and be. A lot of times that'll happen when there's a financial crisis. Oh, we're losing money, let's change all of these things that we can attract more students rather than being core to the mission. That's why I keep looking to Seton. Seton has the governance model we're talking about with the board, but because they set their board really early, and they did a lot of mission training with the board, and they did a lot of culture setting with the parents and the students, they have managed to maintain what I think is a very beautiful Catholic identity. Touring that place, Kennedy was a little bit when I was there, and what Kennedy felt very Catholic at Seton. So we have to be really careful with selecting our board members to make sure that they understand the mission, and to select people who are really dedicated to making sure that this is a Catholic school first before anything else. And again, one of the reasons I'm so excited that Jamie is such a partner in this is one of the things he mentioned when we were talking is he sees that starting the school is a moral imperative. That's the word that I've been playing over since he used it over and over again. We have a moral imperative to make sure people have the option for Catholic education. So he's going to be a leader at the beginning of our school. Many of you will be as well. If we can all be on the same page that this is a moral imperative and that this is what our mission is, then the people governing the school are the ones who are going to help guarantee it stays Catholic. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Father Mignon.
I went to Seattle Prep, which my father did before me, and it's part of a 400-year-old Catholic tradition, namely the Jesuits. Tomorrow at my parish in downtown Seattle, I'm introducing the 8th graders going to Seattle Prep as Jesuit values are that have come from their experience of being in a Jesuit school. However, at the same time, I'm totally committed and involved with Bishop Blanchette. We heard one of their students tonight. I had the wedding of the principal 20 years ago back at Notre Dame. He was part of our ACE program. Notre Dame prepares teachers exclusively for Catholic high schools. And a story from Kennedy that to me is very inspiring. I'm kind of the chaplain to the Italian community in Seattle, and one of these kids who went to a public school was in terrible trouble, drugs and bad crowd. He ran into a Catholic school kid from Kennedy, and this kid said, "You should come and try our school." He is as articulate as the fellow that talked tonight from Bishop Blanchette. He's now their retreat leader. He's 4.0, and he will be going to Santa Clara in the fall. So both Kennedy and Blanchette, tremendously good, long, important history. While we have holy names, we got Seattle Prep and Bellarmine. We also have O'Day High School, a school that really ultimately belongs to St. James Cathedral. So we got a great story to tell. And as Father Moore mentioned, we are the only region on I-5 without a Catholic high school. So it's a big hole in what's a phenomenal experience of Catholic education for our 170 as the Catholic Church in Western Washington.
Kay's grandson goes to O'Day, if you want to ask about that. I'm always impressed when I see him. I think he does a really good job.
We also got a pretty good sized homeschool out in Anacortes.
That's what she's part of.
Oh, that's where you are?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well,
We wanna try to get them to be involved with it,
yeah,
but they have the same, they ask the same question, I'm talking on their behalf.
thank you.
Yes.
And we got one of your own who's on our steering committee
Oh, yeah, Ian, yes.
and a parishioner at Mount Vernon.
Other questions? So again, the purpose of this meeting is information. I hope you have been well informed. The purpose of the meeting is a little inspiration. I hope that you are inspired to keep with us in this project. We've hit some really, really incredible milestones, and I'm very hopeful we'll get Archdiocesan approval and be able to open in a year. It's also networking. We want you to know each other. If you're here just because you want to pray for us, we will always take the prayers. If you're here because you're thinking about a financial gift, please get to know each other and strategize about what you want to give to and what you want this thing to look like, because we're partners in a new adventure. And if you're here because you're parents and you're looking for your kids, get to know each other. What we're looking for is ambassador families. We want to know not just who our partners are, but who our boosters are. We have families who today are already really excited about this high school. We want to bring you in. We want to make you part of the team already, and we want to use your expertise and your passion to help recruit others to come to be members of our first class or two.
And we will be doing a similar session as tonight in the fall down in Mount Vernon, so that Skagit is as integral as Watcom in this process of developing our new Catholic high school.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for your time this evening. It's been a real pleasure.
We're blessed because of your presence and the spouse support.
Thank you.